Let's take a look at getting started with the Metasploit framework. So anytime we do security testing, chances are you're going to use some sort of framework to deliver a payload, to deliver an exploit, whether it's Metasploit, whether it's Poopy, whether it's Covenant, whether it's all these different systems that are out there to help us get our payloads and our exploits across. Well, in this video, we're going to take a look at the Metasploit framework, which is there's a free version and a paid version as well. And we're going to take a look at the different types of tool sets, and think of this as a framework that helps us as pen testers, as security researchers, and us security folks ultimately achieve our desired security testing goals and our outcomes and whatever objective that we have when it comes to security testing. So let's take a look at the Metasploit framework in a little bit of details, just so we've got upcoming videos that we're going to jump into. We're going to look at the modules, we're going to look at payloads, we're going to look at Meterpreter, we're going to look at managing sessions as well when we have more than one session of a host and how we go about the best way to manage our sessions. So there's a lot to cover in this course or in this little down and dirty segment around Metasploit. So anytime you think of Metasploit as a framework, just kind of think of this as a framework essentially. And a framework is a bunch of tools that help us or provide us with options, functions, and features, and they ultimately help us get to our goal, whether that's scanning, whether that's delivering a payload, whether that's executing a script of some sort, or going down the exploitation route. And we're going to cover the basics of Metasploit itself, and then we'll look at some of the details when we start working with workspaces and Meterpreter, and obviously delivering more payloads and the different options within the Metasploit framework as well. So just know that there's a couple of options that are available to us anytime we talk about the Metasploit framework. There's the free and open source, and then we have our paid version. And the paid version, if you want to spend a little bit of money, you kind of get this graphical interface that allows you to sort of click and, present you in a nice graphical sort of user interface, which is nice and handy. And at times, it allows you to have some amazing inputs and other functionalities, such as automating APIs, automation, and things like that. And ultimately, it has that sort of that GUI interface that makes things nice and easy to use. So I'm here at the Rapid7 website, and you can sort of go through, you know, doing more research around the Metasploit framework itself, but it kind of gives you a bit of an understanding on how it works and how you can use the platform. And there is a 30-day free trial as well with the pro version. So should you want to test it out before you go in and buy it, there's that option as well. And just while we're on that sort of discussion, there's obviously a lot of different types of documentation and support and contributions to the framework itself. So you can head over to metasploit.com. You can look at how to install this. We're going to be using the open source free version that comes within Linux. It gives us with more than enough options that we need to do our job and do our requirements for whatever our pen testing goals are. So you can sort of go through this, understand a little bit more about it. If you've never used Metasploit, it's a good place to start and start looking at resources and how it all sort of works together. But that's what we're here to do together anyway. So I'm just going to minimize this screen, and it's going to take us back to the Metasploit console. So I've just gone MSF console. In an upcoming video, we're going to look at the workspaces. So we'll talk about connecting the database if we need to do that, and we'll look at this in a little bit more of a hands-on. So the free version itself comes pre-installed on most instances of Kali. I've not seen it ever on a not instance of Kali. So it comes already installed on Kali, and all you have to do is just go into the console and just type in MSF console, and that takes you to the Metasploit framework. Now here, there's a bunch of different things, and one of my favorite things I remember doing when I was starting out in security was using this banner keyword, right? And it changes the different types of banners to show you, and that's one of the coolest things I remember when I was starting out with the Metasploit framework. So kind of think about this as a toolbox, and there's different options that are available in this toolbox, right? There's things like exploits. So we've already spoken about exploits. So when we need our exploits, it's a good chance that most of the exploits in here are going to be they're going to be delivered through some sort of payload as well. So anytime we talk about our exploits, every good exploit, we need a payload to be delivered essentially. So when we'll talk about that as well. So there's different sort of payloads, and payloads are kind of like a shell. So I think of that like our Meterpreter shell. So something that we've already created before, and we've obviously used our MSF Venom to do that. And that's part of Metasploit and Meterpreter as well. So we can obviously have that hand in hand to help us deliver our sessions. So that's exploits and payloads. There's things like auxiliary modules. So we'll talk about that in just a moment. But if we go this way, so we talk about encoders. So encoders basically encode the payload, and they ensure that they get to the target in one piece or essentially one session. So kind of think of these as like wrappers. So they kind of like an envelope. We put the payload inside the envelope and it gets shipped and delivered to our target. So there's 45 different versions of those. There's NOPs as well, and NOPs are basically, they help us pretty much regulate the size of our payload. Now, if the payload's bigger than it needs to be, and sometimes that causes issues with getting that payload across to a victim or to a host, then it becomes it becomes problematic with on how Metasploit handles that information. So then we can use NOPs in that case to make changes, and that basically helps us keep the size within the actual regulated sizes that needs to be. And then we've got things like auxiliary modules, and kind of think of auxiliary modules as type of scanners, they're tools, almost additional like things like fuzzers as well. So anytime we use an auxiliary module, typically we're going to be scanning for either a version, or we're going to be scanning some sort of, we're going to be scanning the system against something. So it's maybe a known exploit or a known vulnerability. So kind of think of these as additional scanners and tools and fuzzers. They're additional auxiliary tool sets. And then we've got postal exploitation payloads as well. So things like, if once we've gained initial access to that host, there's 409 post modules that we can use and have in our arsenal anytime we compromise a host. So these are additional items that we need to do that data collection, etc. So anytime we send and end up doing that post exploitation, that's the modules where they'll come in handy and they'll help us deliver our payloads. So that's the Meterpreter. That's sort of the Metasploit framework in a nutshell. In an upcoming video, we're going to be looking at this in a lot more detail. So stay tuned. Hope you've enjoyed this little update, and see you in an upcoming video. Bye for now.